Thank you for coming today. So this talk's going to require a little bit of audience interaction at some point, so I'd appreciate it if you take pity on me and try and join in. I will get a drink for whoever joins in at the free bar. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name's Alex. I'm a penetration tester. I work for First Space Technologies. We've recently been acquired by Phalanx Cyber, hence the new branding on the presentation. I write for the British Computer Society Internet Specialist Group, and a real interest of mine in hacking is actually the psychology behind why people fall for attacks, how to sort of manipulate humans as well as just computers and systems. In my spare time, I also like to, I'm quite prominent biology researcher. Okay, so we'll talk about the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to start off with threat landscapes, which can learn about some vulnerabilities that are surrounding phishing. Then we're going to move on to what is spear phishing. We're going to look at the motivation, some facts and statistics, a case study, how to protect against spear phishing, and then any questions you guys might have. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the threat landscape. So 2015 was really the year of ransomware. I know some of you have just been in a ransomware talk, so I don't want to bore you too much. Increased by 752%, with the ransomware families going from 29 to 247. So this was an absolutely massive outburst, and since then it hasn't really cooled down too much. Infamously, we had the WannaCry attacks against the NHS, which I guess is probably the most famous one. So ransomware, just to cover it, it locks down your computer and demands money from you. This is a form of extortion. So business email compromise is when we start getting a little bit more technical and start looking at a little bit more of a psychological way of tricking people. So in a typical business email compromise attack, we will start off by setting up an SMTP server on our own machines, and then we will spoof an email address. So I could send you an email from Bill@Microsoft or whatever you really feel like doing at that point. This makes it appear to come from a genuine source, which makes it a lot stronger. In a business email compromise attack, you'll usually start by spoofing a C-suite employee's email address, so as Chief Operations Officer or Chief Executive Officer, and email to the finance department asking them to deposit X amount of money immediately into an attacker-controlled bank. Business email compromise is really becoming popular at the moment. The average loss of around $140,000, but Leona AG famously lost $44.6 million through this attack. One of the great things about these kinds of attacks is that very little technical skill actually needs to go into making them. So it's extremely easy, and there's a huge audience that can do these. So I'm going to introduce to you here the kill chain. So we as techies and hackers like to try and make ourselves seem a lot smarter than we are, and we call it a big chart. But it's actually really simple. So we start off with the background research, which is Googling the company, finding out any information that you can, and any sort of data you can use to really start planning an attack against your victims. Once you have enough information, we move on to social engineering. Social engineering is where spear phishing fits in. Other types of social engineering attacks include, USB drops, fake phone calls, that kind of thing. Then we need to get onto the network. Once we're on the network, we need to control a computer. This is often done through malware, key logging. There are many different ways that we can really do this. And then we'll explore the network. So we'll look for what's connected, what we can get to, any internal exploits. Find the data, so decide what we actually want, and then grab it, and then we obviously have to bring it back to our computer to either sell or use for however we want. So what is spear phishing? So we've all received emails, phishing emails that go out by the masses, sent to thousands of people, maybe your old Hotmail account or whatever, trying to tell you that there are hot singles near you that want to meet up with you. And as much as every male in the audience probably wants to believe it, it's probably not true. The real difference is with spear phishing, you spend the time to really research your target, understand their lifestyle and how they work. Social media is usually used at the beginning to understand the most, because, I mean, we live in a day and age where we tell everyone everything about ourselves, which makes this job a lot easier for us. The sender's email address will, in a sophisticated attack, appear genuine as well through email spoofing, as we were discussing earlier. There's three main kinds of payloads that are used. So technical, such as ransomware or malware coming through, and this is usually sent by a link or an attachment. And then the really interesting part, which is a psychological payload, which is a bit of a mouthful, but this is business email compromise, basically. So tricking someone into doing something, so tricking them into clicking on the link by pressing a matter of urgency or a matter of desperacy. And then there's credentials theft, which can be through a spoof password or a keylogger or any other kind of route that you decide to take. Oh yeah, of course. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, cool. Okay, so using social media. So when we start one of these attacks, we'll usually start by looking on LinkedIn at the company that we're trying to infiltrate. We will have a look at what employees are there, and we'll try and build a profile over who would be the most likely victim to click on one of these links. The profile that we usually aim at are people that are new to the company. For example, if someone's only been there for 2 or 3 weeks, especially if it's their first job, the chances of them having security awareness training is quite low. And then we'll also look for non-technical employees, because obviously the IT department are a lot less likely to fall for a phishing email than someone that's in a non-technical role, for example. So once we've researched the victims, we then start decided on our victims, we then go onto their Facebook, Instagram, any kind of social media where we can find out information about people, and then we will start planning an attack. For example, Bob goes on holiday to Spain, and he posts a picture that has his hotel in the background. Alice sees this on Facebook, and she decides that she then wants to infect Bob's computer or try and get information out of him. She'll send an email to the hotel that he was staying at, asking a very easy question, such as maybe a question about their resources, asking about their swimming pool or whatever. Once the response is received, then you'll get the email footer and the email structure. So first name dot last name at company.com usually is, but sometimes there are slightly different ones. You'll then use the email footer to construct the spear phishing email. So in this case, we will be messaging, trying to say that there have been items left in the room afterwards that are of high value. Please can you either click on this link to view the pictures or download an attachment so that you may confirm with us. And if these are your items, we'll send them back to you. So this is really playing on people's curiosity. So they're like, oh, what high value items have been found in this room? Or, oh my God, have I lost something? They'll go and, check to see if they've lost anything. But the main thing is that it will then press the urgency on them to click onto the email. So here's an example of a poorly made phishing email. So we've got an email address at the top that doesn't appear genuine whatsoever. And then we've also got Dear Valued Customer. So these are two very obvious giveaways, and probably the first thing that people will check when they do receive an email. So a spear phishing email will have a genuine looking email address, and it will be aimed directly at the person that you are trying to go for. This makes it seem a lot more genuine, and it makes it a lot more likely for people to fall for it. So what is the motivation behind spear phishing? So at this part, it'll be helpful if people are kind of joined in a little bit. So what do you think from this network an attacker would be interested in stealing? Anyone? Credit card information, yeah. So obviously credit card information, they can try and then use the credit card information to buy their own products or steal money or however they intend to use it. What other things do you think they might be interested in stealing? Database, yeah. So you've got the database there, that's an obvious one. You can pull the data back, you can sell that data on to other companies, you can use it for your own use, you can plan more attacks with that data. You might have passwords in there that you can decrypt, or might even be stored in clear text, depending on the company that you've managed to infiltrate. So these are the main areas and the main things that we'd be focusing on as an attacker to try and steal. So the monitoring software. So if we can infiltrate and view the logs, we can see exactly what's happening, what servers are talking to each other, and start getting a bit of an understanding about the actual network itself and how everything's linked together. The calibration, so a calendar, for example. This is particularly interesting to use if you're planning any kind of physical attacks or social engineering. So you can find out what days the IT team might be away, or what time they may be in a meeting, so you can send an email through, and you have a 2-hour time period where there is actually no one there to try and, to be monitoring what's coming through. Communications is another obvious one, so you can see how people are talking to each other. You can even spend some time really researching the way that a specific person speaks to another. For example, if you got into the CEO's email and you wanted to do some business email compromise, you could look at how the CEO was talking to someone in the finance department. And if there are any gives, so we talk in, broken English to each other a lot of the time. We use slang. So if you can understand the slang that people are using to talk to each other, then you can make a much more convincing seeming email. Databases, yeah, that's an obvious one. You can sell the information. We've got the identities as well. So if you can get passports are often kept within servers, so any payroll information, that kind of thing, you could then potentially move on to try and do identity theft or selling people's identities. And then we've got the obvious finance department, where if you can infiltrate that well enough, then you can just send yourself money, right? Oh, that gave away the next slide, great. So, what is the most attractive approach here, pretending that we haven't seen the next slide? I guess most attackers would be, at first, especially as a sort of students doing ethical hacking, you'd probably be like, okay, so we'll look at the laptops and we'll see how people are connecting to the systems. We'll see if we can get some, technical exploits in, if anyone's hosting a web application or whatever, see if we can actually infiltrate through it onto the hardware. So this isn't the most attractive approach, and it's actually really ineffective to try and attack like this sometimes. If you can trick the endpoint and trick the users, there's a lot more chance that you're actually going to be able to get in. There's a lot less chance of you getting noticed as well, particularly in spear phishing. So normal phishing, where you're sending 5,000 or 6,000 emails, you're probably going to get caught. Your campaign may go on for, let's say, for example, 5 hours, and then it will be shut down because people will find it, especially if you're attacking a company and just sending an email to every single person at the company. In fact, you'd hope that it would last a lot less than 5 hours if you're sending it to a whole company. So tricking the user via spear phishing allows us to get onto these devices easily and be connected to the network. Once we're inside the network, we can then start exploring and seeing what we can really do. So some facts and statistics. Some of these are a little bit scary, to be honest with you. So 2/3 of all malware arrives via email attachments. I don't think that's a particular surprise to anyone. It's a very easy way of sending it. So sophisticated phishing emails facilitate 90% of successful cyber attacks. And considering how many cyber attacks are, it's an absolutely huge number. 97% of people can't tell the difference between an authentic email or a well-crafted fake. And here's one that I find very interesting. 56% of email recipients and 40% of Facebook users clicked on a link from an unknown sender, although they knew the risks. And the main reason is because they're curious about it. You get a link that looks slightly appealing to you, or a link that's related to something you're interested in, a lot of people click on it. We've seen a lot in the news recently. Facebook's getting in trouble for fake news. Fake news is an absolutely massive example of this, because I'm sure we all see on Facebook quite regularly there are articles getting posted which you can clearly tell are false, but they wouldn't still be making them if people weren't actually clicking on them. So let's take a look at a case study. So the Carbonac Group attacked banking institutions. I've read a few different reports that vary from $500 million to $1 billion, so I don't know the exact figure that they managed to get, but it's a hell of a lot of money. So they started all of their attacks. They started all of their attacks with phishing emails, spear phishing. So they would have started by going in and researching the company, as we were talking about earlier, and building these big profiles of the victims. Once they were on the network, they were recording everything that was typed by staff by using things like keyloggers. They were also having a look at CCTV footage and other video footage, and they were, instead of, as soon as they were on the network, trying to take things out and attack, they really took the time to learn how the internal workings of the company were, so that they could then spoof and pretend to be one of those employees. And watching them on CCTV, you can start to learn employee movements, what time they do this, what time they go to lunch, their dress code, that kind of thing. This would assist them if they decided to do any physical attacking. So the hackers started simulating real transactions. So they created high-value bank accounts that they would then use to deposit money into their own attacker-controlled accounts. If you have a look at normal bank attacks outside of the world of cyber, so there was a big heist recently, I can't actually remember where it was, but I think they got about $18 million or £18 million, and I think they were all caught fairly quickly. Whereas Carbonac, the majority of them haven't been caught. They've got a huge amount of money. So large sums of money were transferred through the SWIFT network. Another way that they used to get money was by making ATMs and cash machines dispense money and sending what we'd refer to as a mule to go and collect the money and then bring it back to them, paying them a little bit, and then they can launder the cash from there. So we talked a bit about the kill chain earlier, and I introduced you to it. So let's walk through. What do you mean? Oh, right. Sorry, guys. So here's the kill chain. Carbonac would have started with internet searches, finding out all of the information about the company. Moving on to the social networks, looking at metadata, looking at their phone calls, checking sites like 192.com to find as much information as possible. Once they found out who they're intending for their victims to be, they then moved on to the social engineering, and in this case they used spear phishing attacks to get onto the network. Once they were on the network, they used many different ways to control PCs. They used key logging to log keystrokes. This is a good way to get credentials as well, so they can log into other parts of the network. Unfortunately, a lot of people use the same passwords for everything, so once you find one password, you can probably get into another account as well. So malware was used as well. So once they were on the network, they would have explored and they would have looked at the different areas that they could actually attack and what they could get from attacking these areas. So they chose the CCTV to monitor, as we discussed earlier. And then, I chose CCTV, and then they used a keylogger to steal passwords. And then once they'd taken control, they started looking at databases. They started looking at the Windows administration, any kind of really key controllers and admin points throughout the network. They were quite silent on the network. They tried not to make as much noise, tried to make the least amount of noise possible. And these attacks were done over quite a long time, and they were well planned, well thought through, and really sophisticated, which is probably why a lot of them haven't been caught and the attack was so successful. So then they'd found all of the data, and they'd created the high-value bank accounts and the SWIFT accounts. They'd then obviously stolen the data, and they'd taken some data back, but their main attack was to get money, so they'd built the high-profile bank accounts. So how do we protect against spear phishing? The main defense against spear phishing is security awareness training, so teaching your staff or your students how to really tell the difference between a genuine email and a fake-looking one. This creates a lot more complications when it comes to spear phishing, because it's a lot harder to tell the difference between a realistic email and a fake one. So other things that we suggest is, if you are suspicious of an email, you need to call the person or organisation in the from field before you do anything. Sometimes they'll have numbers at the bottom of the emails in the footers. These can also be spoofed to be an attacker-controlled phone. So if you got a suspicious-looking email from Apple and you wanted to call them to confirm whether it was genuine or whether it was a fake email, it's better to then find the official number for Apple by going onto their website, as opposed to looking at the bottom of the email footer and ringing the number straight away. This is actually quite a common confirmation that people do in phishing emails, where they put their own attacker-controlled phone number. So never click any links that request personal information or sensitive information. This should just be the rule of the internet, really. Less and less people are falling for mass phishing emails, because there's a lot more awareness now. People are talking about phishing. They're explaining that these are the things you're not supposed to be doing. And companies are now investing quite heavily in different forms of security awareness training. So report any emails that you might suspect might be a spear phishing campaign within your company. So when Carbonac were inside the network, they would have had to try and explore some kind of privilege escalation techniques when they were in there. They would have done this initially by scanning inside the network. Has anyone got any ideas of how they think they might have pushed through, might have got through? No, fair enough. I'm not too sure either. But when you're inside the network, it's all about looking for either known software versions that have exploits available to them, looking for kernel exploits, and there are quite a few different techniques that can be used. So I think this has ended a little bit faster than I thought it would. I thought there'd be a bit more audience interaction, so I do apologise for that. I'll try not to do that in future. So I've recently tried to start using Twitter, very unsuccessfully, may I add. So feel free to follow me. If anyone does have any questions about this that they don't want to ask inside the room, then feel free to send an email to me. You might want to take a picture of that if you want to, because I doubt anyone's going to remember how to spell my surname. Has anyone got any questions for now? Examples from our experience. So when we are working with clients, we find that when a company is doing their first phishing campaign, we have a stupid statistic of the amount of people who fall for it. I can't remember the exact figure, but I think it's over 50%. Once we work with companies and we start launching phishing campaigns, see absolutely massive drops in the number of people that are falling for them. I think it's extremely important for companies to do phishing training, and I don't think anyone knows how vulnerable they are until they've actually done some kind of phishing test.
So do you start with spear phishing, or you first do one general to get a baseline?
It depends on what the company's asking for, really. Sometimes they want to see how their staff would fall for a mass phishing email. So a lot of the time when we do this, we'll spoof an email address that seems like it's coming from the company, telling them that they're all going to win £50 or that there's a free bar or something, just anything that you can use really to trick them into clicking on it. But sometimes they do want specifically spear phishing. So when we do this, we'll usually start off and build a list through LinkedIn of about 20 employees, and then we'll start narrowing it down whilst we're researching their personal lives. So we'll build a full profile of a person. We will know their names, where they come from, any information about their family, literally anything you can find online that can be used to support your attack. And then from there, we will then narrow it down until we've decided on the people that we're going to attack.
Yeah, and that's the ones that look like the most vulnerable, the ones that are most capable.
Most vulnerable, usually, that we'll go for in a phishing campaign. It depends. These things can be tailored quite a lot to what the company actually needs and what they are trying to get out of it. So when we scope one of these engagements, one of the most important questions is, what do you actually want from this? And then we'll tailor the phishing campaign to their needs. Anyone else? Yeah.
There are also often tools and services you can use for mass phishing. Is there anything that helps you to do phishing specifically?
I'm not. For us, we do it ourselves. We don't really bother using any tools because this isn't something that takes a long time. We'll start off with a company, and then you'll spend half an hour finding your first list of victims, and then you'll spend maybe 2 or 3 hours searching through their social media to find the way that you want to attack them and how vulnerable they are. I guess there might be some automated tools out there that I don't know about, but there's a real human element inside planning an attack because it's a psychological attack as well as just technical. Yep.
So follow up, if you're doing that in your company, are there any specific privacy protection concerns?
Yeah, I mean, there are privacy and data protection concerns. One of the things, for example, we don't like, if we're doing a spear phishing campaign, we don't like to tell the company who has fallen for it, for example. There's a lot of legal, I guess, processes that are involved in making sure that the humans are protected, the company's protected, and all of the data that we're getting back is safe. So, for example, if we're trying to steal passwords, we'll delete those, obviously, and we'll make sure that they're never stored in a way that anyone can access them. Any other questions? Yeah.
Obviously, without giving your companies what do you think is the most efficient approach that you've taken so far? And I'm not talking about using password or if you get an Apple voucher or stuff like that. What would you say is the most advanced spear phishing?
Most advanced spear phishing. I mean, the beauty of spear phishing is that it doesn't need to really be too advanced. So we've had a few examples where we've worked with high-profile clients. One that was a few months ago, I think, we found an employee that fit all our criteria straight away. So we went on, and it was an HR employee, been working there for about 2 or 3 weeks. You don't really need to have such a sophisticated and advanced way in when you're doing penetration testing. However, hackers do have a much harder time with this because if they're trying to install malware on the systems, they obviously need to get a custom written 0-day to get through antivirus and that kind of thing. But in terms of penetration testing, we find the wounds, but we don't poke them too deep. So we never go as far as writing 0 days to try and install on our company's systems or anything like that. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, depending on the engagement that we're using, we can often ring people pretending to be the IT department or pretending to be some kind of form of authority that would make them want to click on it. That again goes down to the human element of the psychology of really trying to trick people and have a sense of urgency that makes you do this. Yep. I haven't personally seen any link on small versus large. Spear phishing is effective no matter your organisation, really. Large companies, you would hope would have more of a budget for security awareness training, but that's not. Well, they may have more of a budget, but from experience, there's not really much difference between them. Just because it's a big company and they have a lot of money, it doesn't mean that they're secure or that they've actually bothered investing in the time to teach their employees about security awareness. Cool. Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Pardon? Data loss prevention. What do you mean? Yeah, there are many tools that are available to try and protect against phishing, but the spear phishing, on the other hand, is a lot easier to get through than sending a mass phishing email. So a lot of the tools that are available to try and stop phishing, they will look at how many of these emails are being sent, right? If there's 5,000 emails being sent or whatever, then they'll be put into a spam box or if there are loads coming through. But if you're only targeting 5 or 6 people, it's a lot more difficult to find. Yep.
When you end up sending out emails, is it better to send it to the company address, or the person's company address, or your private full address?
Well, it depends on what you're doing, really. We because we're attacking organisations, we'll usually be sending it to their email address. And I guess it depends what you as an attacker, it depends what you want to get out of it. Because if I got into your home computer, I doubt there'd be as much that I could do as if I got into the company's network and then could start exploring through servers. Anyone else? Yep. Any themes that we use? Yeah. Yeah, winning things is a very common one that we use. People fall for that quite often. Here's a free £50 voucher for you to use here, blah, blah, blah. We'll spoof the email coming from internally. So as if say for example, it was a marketing stunt. So it would say the marketing team are giving you all £50 to go and do something this weekend as a reward, or the HR team, sorry, they're giving you £50 as a reward for working for us to use this weekend. Click here to claim your voucher or to claim the money. And then almost all the time people will click on it. It's quite funny. It's almost scary in a lot of ways how effective phishing is. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you very much, guys. Sorry that it was cut a bit short.